Welcome to another explainer. If you've ever found yourself staring down the sheer, overwhelming complexity of managing a high-level research project, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to shift our perspective a bit. We aren't going to look at systematic inquiry as just another academic hurdle or some tedious exercise in gathering facts. Instead, we're going to approach this as if we are master architects, tasked with constructing a massive, enduring structure from the ground up. And as any pro knows, you don't just break ground on a complex build without a master plan. So today, we're examining the blueprint of systematic inquiry. Our ultimate goal today is simple, but honestly, it's profoundly important: transforming raw curiosity into structured knowledge. That right there, that is the true essence of research. I mean, we all start with these untamed abstract questions, right? But without a deliberate process, those questions almost always lead to sprawling, unfocused data dumps. In this explainer, we are mapping out the exact logical sequence that takes that initial curiosity and refines it. We're going to explore how you mold those abstract concepts into solid, impactful knowledge that actually holds up under scrutiny and stands the test of time. So here is our roadmap for the build. We'll start with the blueprint of inquiry, then we'll move into laying the foundation. After that, gathering and evaluating materials, followed by building the argument, and finally, we'll wrap the whole thing up with the finishing touches. It's a structured, totally manageable sequence of construction phases designed to keep your project on track from day one. Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, the blueprint of inquiry. Systematic inquiry is essentially a logical sequence that guides your project from conception to completion. Think of this literally as the master blueprint for your entire endeavor. Now, why is this absolutely crucial? Well, without this deliberate path, you risk falling into the trap of just randomly assembling disjointed facts. And in professional research, that lack of structural integrity means your argument is going to collapse the second it hits peer review. Having a master blueprint prevents scope creep. It guarantees that every single piece of information you gather has a specific structural purpose, taking you safely from that initial spark of an idea all the way to a finalized, polished project. Moving right along to Section 2, laying the foundation. As we all know, every single enduring structure needs an incredibly solid foundation before you can even think about putting up walls. In the world of systematic inquiry, laying that foundation means asking yourself one vital question. What is the clear, focused question that defines your scope of study? A vague, overly broad topic is, well, it's like pouring concrete onto a swamp. It's just going to sink under its own weight. Your focused question acts as a strict perimeter for your foundation. It tells you exactly where you're building, and honestly, just as importantly, where you are not building, which is going to save you countless hours of wasted effort. Setting up that perimeter happens in two synchronized steps. First, you identify and develop a topic. But listen, you absolutely cannot do this in a vacuum. You have to immediately pair it with Step 2, conducting a preliminary search for information. Actually, this is where a lot of researchers stumble. They lock in this rigid topic before ever surveying the existing literature. That early preliminary search is just vital because it establishes crucial background knowledge and helps refine your initial idea into something highly manageable. You're basically surveying the actual terrain to see if it can even support your blueprint before you commit to digging. Let's jump into Section 3, gathering and evaluating materials. All right, once your foundation is poured and set, it's time to gather your building materials. And make no mistake, the quality of what you select here entirely dictates the final strength of your intellectual structure. We're looking for essential materials here: books, articles, and most importantly, credible sources. Notice that emphasis on the word credible. In our current era of absolute information overload, you aren't just looking for any old brick to throw into the wall. You need specific materials that have been vetted, peer-reviewed, and verified to actually hold structural weight. But locating those materials is only the first step. The second, and honestly far more critical step, is evaluating those sources for reliability, relevance, and accuracy. It is shockingly common to see major academic or professional arguments completely retracted simply because the foundational sources weren't properly vetted. Imagine building a skyscraper, right? You would literally never use steel beams that haven't been meticulously stress tested. In your research, evaluated sources act as those load-bearing pillars. If they're weak, biased, or irrelevant, your whole argument is vulnerable. Rigorously checking them isn't just a best practice, it is absolutely non-negotiable.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is the stark contrast between raw material and evaluated sources. Unchecked books and articles are essentially just unrefined debris sitting on a construction site. They don't actually do anything for you until they undergo that rigorous evaluation process to prove they are reliable, relevant, and accurate. Only when a source passes that test does it transform from raw data into real, undeniable structural support for your paper. Relying on raw material is just hoping for the best, but utilizing evaluated sources, that is engineering for certainty.
Which brings us to Section 4, building the argument.
Okay, this is where we transition from gathering supplies to actually framing the walls. The visible structure of your argument is about to take physical shape. But wait, before you grab a hammer and start building, you have to make notes systematically. Organizing your ideas, evidence, and references is the critical prep work required before you even attempt to write the paper. Think of systematic note-taking like mapping out where your plumbing and electrical lines need to go before putting up the drywall. If you skip this mapping phase and jump straight into drafting, you are inevitably going to face structural conflicts and major teardowns later on. Once you actually begin writing, you're primarily working with 3 structural elements: structuring arguments, presenting evidence, and articulating findings clearly. This is how you physically construct your case. You build a strong frame with logical arguments, and you reinforce it with your presented evidence. But that third element, articulating findings clearly, man, that is where so many experts lose their audience. They get so caught up in complex jargon that the core message just gets buried. Clear articulation is like putting in the windows. It allows everyone else to see inside the beautiful structure you've built. If your audience can't clearly understand your findings, the underlying strength of your argument doesn't even matter.
Finally, we've reached Section 5, the finishing touches.
At this point, the heavy lifting is done, the roof is on, but before we hand over the keys, we need that essential polish. And that starts with proper citation. So the crucial point here is giving credit and maintaining strict academic integrity. Citations are quite literally the bolts holding the structural integrity of the broader research community together. By pointing exactly to where you sourced your materials, you do 2 things. You prove to your audience that your own structure is soundly engineered, and you show necessary respect to the architects and researchers whose hard work made yours possible.
Finally, right before submission, you must run your work through an ultimate proofreading checklist focused on 3 crucial metrics: clarity, coherence, and correctness. This isn't just about catching a stray typo. This is a high-level quality assurance check. Clarity means ensuring your ideas are easily digestible and free from unnecessary ambiguity. Coherence is all about flow. Does one paragraph logically and seamlessly connect to the next to pull the reader through your complex argument? And correctness ensures your data, grammar, and formatting adhere to required standards. Hitting all 3 guarantees the final product you deliver is pristine and fully functional.
When you consistently follow this master plan, the result really speaks for itself. Systematic, credible, and impactful research that can be widely shared, heavily scrutinized, and confidently built upon by others. You haven't just thrown words on a page. By respecting the process, you've actively transformed your initial, unformed curiosity into a robust intellectual asset. You've taken an abstract blueprint and engineered it into a finished, authoritative piece of structured knowledge that adds real, tangible value to the conversation.
Which leaves me with a final, pretty provocative question for you to consider. Now that you have the blueprint, what will your curiosity build? The sequence of systematic inquiry is proven. The logical steps are laid out, and the necessary materials are out there just waiting to be evaluated. The challenge now is to take this structured framework and apply it to your own professional inquiries. The tools are absolutely in your hands to build something both lasting and profoundly insightful.